What's up, Atlanta? My name is Charlie, and welcome to Big Sports ATL, where this week I'm going to be going over the Hawks' big moves at the trade deadline, as well as their implications for the future of the team going forward in the rebuild that they've been working through over the last couple of years. Now, in case you missed anything or need a refresher, I've got the transactions up on the screen here, but just as a quick overview, we brought in Clint, Capela, Dewayne, Dedmon, and Skal Labissiere. I might have butchered that, but that's how the internet told me to pronounce it, so I'm sorry if I got that wrong. And in the process, we gave up Evan Turner, Chandler Parsons, Alex Lynn, and Jabari Parker, as well as the 2020 first round pick we had from the Nets. Every other player we brought in, we waived, so don't worry about those. The real highlights here, though, are Clint Capela and Dewayne Dedmon. Now, if you've been watching this team, you know that we really don't have much bench depth, and in particular, we just had nothing really viable at center. Alex Lynn was doing well off the bench earlier in the season before he got hurt, but Bruno Fernando and Damian Jones are not really starting quality centers. Fernando could get there, but he's not there yet, and I think Damian Jones is what he is at this point. So with that in mind, the need at center was obvious. It's the biggest hole on the team, or was the biggest hole on the team, and I don't think anybody who's a Hawks fan is really upset about this trade. I think everybody's pretty ecstatic to bring in some quality centers. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you to be happy about this trade because you probably already are. What I would like to do is take a look ahead at how this is going to impact the Hawks' future and what it likely indicates that Travis Schlenk and the rest of the front office are planning to do going forward as we start to transition out of this rebuild now that we have what appears to be a bona fide superstar in Trae Young. So to understand the implications of this trade for the Hawks, we need to go back a few years to the Golden State Warriors and their transition from lottery team to playoff team to ultimately dynasty. You'll remember that Travis Schlenk was a pretty big part of that front office, and when he came to the Hawks, he established pretty quickly that what he wants to do is build a Warriors 2.0. Not literally copy the same players, but copy the model that was successful, at least in terms of how they brought their players in. So what did the Warriors do? Well, first off, they drafted very well, right? They had drafted Steph Curry, they drafted Klay Thompson, they drafted Draymond Green. Those are three perennial all-stars pretty much. And of course that's a bit of an understatement because Steph Curry is literally the greatest shooter of all time. So we're not expecting anybody the Hawks draft to actually be Steph Curry despite all of the comparisons that Trae may draw. Now, once the Warriors had established themselves as a playoff team with that core of three, they then went out and traded for Andre Iguodala. Now, Iguodala is not a superstar or a Hall of Famer by any means, but he is a very good player. And I think most people would agree that Iguodala's acquisition on top of Curry's growth from great shooter to greatest shooter is really what put that team over the top and turned them into a true dynasty. Well, that and Kevin Durant signing with them after they won 73 games, but, you know. And I think these trades by the Hawks are an indication that the front office feels like they're ready to make that Iguodala trade, despite the fact that we haven't actually made the playoffs yet. Clint Capela, who's really the center of all of this, no pun intended, is not, an earth-shattering superstar. He's not a guy that's making max player money. He's not Kevin Durant, but he certainly could be our Andre Iguodala. I think with the scale of this 4-team trade, a lot of people look at it and think, okay, Capela is now the number 2 guy on this team, right? But I don't think that's really the case. If you were to draw that Warriors comparison from our players, Trae would obviously be the Steph Curry, and the Klay Thompson, I don't think is Clint Capela. I think it could be any one of John Collins, Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter, or Cam Reddish. And if 2 of those 4 even sniff their potential, that's your Klay Thompson and your Draymond Green right there. Now, I'm not saying that Clint Capela suddenly makes us a championship contender. We still have a lot of depth issues that need to be solved over the next 2 years, but we're in a position now where we should be in the playoffs next year. I think that will be the expectation. If you're a Hawks fan, I think your takeaway here is that the front office feels like this is a team that's ready to start competing in the playoffs and hopefully start to make a splash a few years down the road. So, what does a few years down the road look like for this team? Are we going to be in a position where we have the money to bring in the depth we need or bring in an additional star if we don't get that second bona fide superstar out of the guys we have? And the answer is, we're going to be in pretty good shape. Even after adding over $30 million to next year's payroll with Dedmon and Capela, we still have over $50 million in projected cap space, assuming the cap ends up around $109 million. So that's room for a max contract, theoretically, but there's not really anybody that I see as max worthy in 2020 free agency aside from Anthony Davis, who is pretty universally expected to go back to the Lakers. What we can do is start to bring in depth, and particularly start to bring in shooters. With how insanely talented Trae Young is shooting, driving, and passing, we want to get as much space on the floor as we can. Plus, it's 2020. The NBA is about the three now, so we need guys that can shoot the three. Now, already on our roster, I feel pretty good about Trae himself, obviously, Kevin Huerter, and John Collins as a stretch four, all shooting pretty well. Cam Reddish's shot has really been coming alive since January, and I think DeAndre Hunter will pan out pretty well as a 3-and-D type wing too. But let's say 2 out of those 5 fall off next year or don't show the growth we would expect. Somehow they don't turn into the guy that we want them to be. We'll be able to sign somebody that is established. We're not going to go out and sign any stars, but you are going to be able to fill out this roster with guys who are legitimate bench players and probably be able to make a run at the playoffs. Of course, in doing that, you don't want to hamper yourself from re-signing your own guys a few years down the road. Now, the first one up will, of course, be John Collins, who will be eligible to sign an extension as early as this summer, which would take effect in 2021. I think what you're most likely to see here is the team filling out the roster with short or relatively inexpensive contracts so that when Collins' extension kicks in 2021, that'll take us close to or just over the cap. And just as a reminder, any player that we drafted, we have their bird rights, which means we can go over the salary cap in signing them. Now, I know what you're thinking. Don't we want to leave cap room in 2021 for one of these massive free agents like Giannis or Kawhi Leonard? Well, sure, that would be nice, hypothetically, but the thing is, we've never brought a guy like that to Atlanta. It's just not something that's happened, and if we want to attract that kind of free agent, I think we have to compete with the guys that we have first. We don't want to be the Knicks clearing all of his cap space every year so they can sign X huge free agent and then never actually doing it because nobody wants to play for the freaking Knicks. What we want to do, like Schlenk established early in his tenure, is be like the Warriors. Draft very well, trade for a guy like Iguodala or Clint Capela, take that core, and go compete. Now, obviously, our situation is a little different because we aren't a playoff team yet, but Trae Young at this stage in his career is far ahead of where Steph Curry was in his second year. Steph Curry didn't really become the guy he is today until 2012, 2013. I think it's fair to say that Trae, if he isn't already, at least will be a top 10 player in the NBA within the next year or two. That's a guy you can build a team around, and that's a guy you can go out and make a trade like this for and start to compete with. We're not going to make the playoffs this year, but I can tell you right now, we are next year. And a few years down the road, if any of these young guys we drafted really start to pan out and turn into all-stars, the rest of the East better watch out. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, and if you want to see more Atlanta sports content in the future, be sure to subscribe. I'll have content on all 4 of our pro teams over the next few weeks here, so be sure to stay tuned. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around Atlanta.